The key findings from the research have been very interesting. I think the high-level message that we would take away from this is that HR is playing a strategic role. HR is having a strategic conversation with the business and is able to influence the way in which that business formulates its strategy. That's the good news. The less positive news, I think, is that where HR is struggling or certainly facing more challenge is on execution, the ability to execute on the strategy that it's defined with the business. We found 6 key themes predominated the research findings. The first was that people strategy is business strategy. The two are inextricably linked. The people strategy should just be a subset of your business strategy and not something that's developed in isolation. However, having said that, what we found that in many organisations that joined upness, that total degree of alignment was an aspiration rather than a reality. The second finding, which we found really interesting, was really about the role of the HR leader, and that was pivotal. And the role of the HR leader was not just about their position in the organisation. So HR functions have aspired for a number of years to have a seat at the table. But what we found was that seat at the table didn't necessarily mean that the HR function had a place in the conversation. Where they did, we found that was generated by the fact that the individual themselves had significant credibility as a business person first, had impact, had influence, and was in that conversation because of those skills rather than just because of their position per se. The third area was probably obvious, but key effective people strategies are driven by relevance and focus. So the business is able to engage with a strategy that is directly relevant to what the business needs to achieve and is focused. And the need to test and retest that with the business because life changes, things move forwards, the ability to maintain that relevance and that focus was critical. The fourth key area that we found was that, as I've already alluded to, was that creation was easier than execution. So we found organisations rated themselves relatively highly in their ability to create a compelling people strategy, but execution was where they struggled, where they fell down. And we found really a number of areas that we felt contributed to that. They were that often that people strategy was seen as the preserve of business partners and centres of expertise and actual involvement from the operational side of HR, which in a number of cases was really going to be the key vehicle for delivering the strategy, was not happening that often. So thinking about how you were going to execute, how you were going to translate your strategy into day-to-day action wasn't happening at the strategy development phase, with the knock-on effect that when you wanted to implement, there were key challenges. Another factor that contributed significantly to the challenge in execution was the fact that HR, once having agreed key themes with the business, would often have a tendency to take away those key themes and develop the next phase of the strategy in isolation. The knock-on result of that would often be that when HR emerged at the end of those deliberating phases and developing the strategy with its views on what should happen next, the business reaction would often be, that's great, off you go and deliver it. So no real ownership of the strategy, or worse still, not sure that actually fits with what we were asking. So that tendency to develop a strategy in isolation rather than in genuine collaboration with the business was a key feature. Last 2 areas really that we found as critical were communication and the need to tell a compelling story. So how do you signpost elements of the people strategy, link them in a way that is completely obvious to line managers in the business so they understand how what you're asking them to do on the people front links to the business strategy. Doing that in simple, clear language that the line understands, the importance of that can't be underestimated. And I think the final thing that we found was that a lot of the organisations that we were talking to have made significant investment over the last few years to make sure that they have an HR organisation that's fit for purpose. So they've invested significantly in redesigning that organisation, restructuring, transforming it. What we found was, even though people felt their organisation was fit for purpose, where they were still lacking was in making sure that they had exactly the right capabilities within the organisation to deliver.